Okay, perfect. So, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Wild Mom podcast. I have a very special guest, Alice Kingsnorth, and she is going to be talking to us about something that is really close to my heart because I experienced it myself, and it is how we navigate and avoid traumatic births, how it impacts us and our kids, and what we can do to ensure that we have a really sacred, lovely experience because birth is truly a magical time for us and we want to make sure that we are able to fully thrive in this period. So, welcome so much to the podcast. I want you to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about what you do on this third plane, and then we'll get into our juicy topic for today.
Yes, thank you. Hello. I'm so excited to be here with you, and thank you for this opportunity to get chatting about all things birth. So I am, Alice Kingsnorth, and I'm a personal power coach, primarily for parents. And that has really evolved, as I'm sure you understand, when you kind of get working and you realize like who you really kind of gravitate towards. And I've realized that all areas of my work. So I first started on kind of looking at shifting our careers and really kind of making it work for you and what you actually want for your future and your family life too. Because a big reason for why I left my kind of corporate job was because I wanted to have the freedom to be a mum on my terms and not kind of send my kid off to nursery because my job is telling me to. And then I kind of shifted more into relationships because I understood the impact that that has on your health and happiness as a parent, and then obviously on your kids. And so I still incorporate the career and relationships. And then because of what I'll be talking about today, I have brought in a really important area of birth and how this really is actually the foundation of your parenthood journey. And if you can be really intentional about your birth experience and kind of step out of the collective fear that is dominating this topic, you will have a much smoother parenthood ride for sure. So yeah, I'm really excited to speak all about this.
So let's get right into it. How was your birth experience? Because usually, when we're led to something as powerful as shifting our birth experience, usually it comes with our own navigation that maybe didn't go as planned. So, what was your birth experience
Mhm.
like?
Yeah, so I've got two little boys. One is almost one in a couple of weeks, and the other one is almost four in March. And I'm from London, so I gave birth with my first son in London. I had every intention. I did all the kind of right steps that majority of women do that I come across anyway. I did the hypnobirthing course. I really did the visualization practice, breathing practice, positive mindset. I really thought I was prepared, and I really realized I really wasn't. I was missing the most important part, and that was the connection to my personal power and like completely trusting myself. So I went into labor naturally on day 9 post my due date. Which again is very typical. I think 10 days is the average in the UK anyway, that you're going to be over your due date. And then my waters broke all over my sofa at home. And obviously, I was excited. I was like, yes, this means we're progressing. And I had been having contractions since 5 a.m. that morning, and it was now like 8 p.m. So I felt like, okay, now we can go to hospital. And I didn't have a car. So we knew that my husband and I would have to get a taxi. So that kind of logistically meant like, let's just get everything together and go. And I don't want to come back type thing. So we got to hospital and I was super calm. My breathing was incredible. I could manage, obviously it was intense, but I could manage fine. And I think because I was so calm, and obviously being a first time mum, I was kind of dismissed as, oh no, you're definitely nowhere near giving birth. So they kind of said like, if I'll do an internal check or you just go home. And I really didn't want an internal check. And to be honest, I was kind of the fear got to me about the internal checks because there's so many pros and cons, but it was more the cons of, you're going to get your increased likelihood of infection and all these things that I was just like, nope, I don't want it. But it was my decision was coming from a place of fear. And that's where I've changed my mindset around this a lot as well. So the midwife was like, well, you can go home then. And I was like, well, what do you mean? Because I'm in active labor. I'm literally having contractions every 2 minutes. You can see it. They didn't ask me any questions about how active I was in terms of my contractions or even that my waters had broken already. And they just said, no, if you're going to give birth, just call an ambulance. Like, and I was like, well, I don't want that. So I said, I gave in to the internal check, and I did say, like, please don't rummage around or like poke me too hard type thing, because I know that they can do that sweep and stretch at the same time. So she checked and she was like, wow, you're already 3 centimeters dilated. Okay, you can stay. So I was like, oh my gosh, like hallelujah. But this was during the kind of COVID pandemic time. So my husband was told to wait outside. I was put into a side, like the one of the rooms that was available, but I did ask for a birthing pool. And the woman said, it's not available yet, but it will be soon. So you're next on the list. So again, I thought, okay, I can do this. I was by myself. My husband had all the bags. I only had a cup of water and my phone. Um, I honestly can't even tell you how long I was by myself for, but my husband said it was a very long time. And he kept asking, can I come in yet? And they kept saying, no, you need to do a COVID test first. And he actually never was given a COVID test. I think it got to the point where I was by myself for like almost 2 hours. And then my husband was like, this is ridiculous. I'm coming in. And I think the midwives by that point were like, yeah, okay, this, yeah, it doesn't make any sense. And kind of cutting this story to get to the point, I was doing so well that again, I wasn't believed how far I was progressing. And I had that urge to like, I felt like I needed a poo. And I also had heard that this is a sign that your body is starting to naturally push. But my midwife didn't believe me. She wanted to do an internal check and she told me to get on my back, and I could not get on my back. And because I just, it really frustrates me that it's that first time you don't have this experience, you don't know what you're doing, you do hand over your power, literally. Or so I describe this as we tap out of our power. We don't give our power away because we allow other people to overpower us, basically. So I allowed the midwife to overpower me. I kind of didn't trust myself, like to the point where I should have. I didn't have that 100% trust. And she ended up twisting the baby's head in the birth canal as she was rummaging around. She tried to drain my bladder. I had nothing in there, and my whole body just shut down. Like I had no contractions anymore. I could feel nothing. And then when they started checking for the baby's heartbeat, it was like super slow, and then she lost it. And that's when she started panicking, and she like shouted at my husband to press the emergency button, and he didn't even know where it was. And he was like, where, what? And then she got her colleagues to rush in, and it was all very dramatic and chaotic. They put me onto a wheelchair, then got me onto a bed, literally running me down a corridor to the labor ward, which was downstairs. So I had to get in a lift. Um, and by this point, I had literally surrendered. I was like, okay, my body is not happy. It's not doing what it's meant to do. I know I'm in survival mode. And this is actually where I'm so grateful I did do the hypnobirthing course, because my awareness and knowledge around breathing and how it's so important to stay calm to make sure the blood is flowing to your uterus and not to your arms and legs. I genuinely think this is potentially what saved my baby's life, because I just felt, and I also felt like I was being protected in this moment because I felt this really crazy calm wave over me. I had my eyes shut the entire time. I completely drowned out the chaos that was around me. There was probably about, my husband said there was a lot of people, so maybe about 15 doctors, nurses, people in and out. And the doctor did read my notes, which the midwives refused to do, which I'm not sure why. And the doctor gave me a lot of confidence, and he was like, okay, he did check me and he said, you're 10 centimeters. And I was like, well, kind of, I know that because my body was obviously ready to push. So yeah, so that is kind of what happened. And he did say you can either wait until your body comes back with your contractions, but it could be another 10 hours of this, and we're really going to have to monitor the baby, or you can meet your baby in 15 minutes. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to go for the safety option here, and I want to see my baby now alive, please. And obviously I was scared. So that was my first experience. And I think all of that, like the disappointment, obviously the trauma, the fear that my body was in complete shock. I had, yeah, just had so much expectation and good wishes, and it all just kind of was the complete opposite to what I had imagined. So I didn't realize that I was kind of going to be carrying trauma through that kind of postpartum period, and my recovery was really, really hard. And I later worked out that you actually are 25%, I think it's 24%, um, it's 24% longer to heal if you're in a like a stressful survival state before you go into an operation. And of course, it makes sense. So my recovery was really hard compared to loads of other people that I've had know that have had C-sections. I was like, why was mine so awful and difficult and painful? But now I understand why. And I just cried every single day. I was in agony. And I don't want to kind of add to the fear mongering that goes around, but now I understand why this was all kind of unfolding in the way it did. So, my second child, I moved to Peru at the beginning of 2023, got pregnant within a few months. And then I was like, well, now I need to work out a whole new world of giving birth in a different country. My Spanish is kind of basic conversational, so I was like, well, I really need to find a doctor that speaks English just for my safety and to make sure we're really aligned and on the same page. And then as I was doing my research, I found out that I'm living in a country where 70% of women go for C-sections in the private health kind of sector. And the majority of the remaining 30% are induced at 40 weeks, or they go for an epidural. Um, and so, yeah, this was also like not a very good start for me. And I just knew that I was like, right, I've got to do a lot of work here and get out all of my tools as a personal power coach and kind of demonstrate that you can absolutely reconnect with your truth, anchor into your personal power, and create that natural birth experience that we are designed to do.
Oh, I
And
am.
that's what happened. So I should probably finish that my second son, he was born naturally, no medication whatsoever, no pain relief. And I was the first birth in my hospital with all the doctors and nurses on duty who had ever given birth without any kind of pain relief or epidural. And I didn't know that, thankfully, until after I'd given birth. So the really nice touch to this is that I got my husband to film the end of the birth because I wanted it for my own purposes. And my doctor actually asked for my permission to share my video with her students so that her doctors and nurses that she teaches can actually see for their own eyes that it is so possible to give birth naturally without an epidural.
What a shift in how the births were. And my heart goes out to you because I understand I had a traumatic birth with my daughter as well, and it is in no way an experience that I wish upon anyone because it really does take you away from this beautiful spiritual awakening, this beautiful, we are portals. We are portals for
Mhm.
these beautiful spirits to come into this physical world. And like you said, you yourself can hold on to that trauma and your recovery can take a little bit longer and be a little bit more painful, let's say. Imagine how it is for them coming into this world. If we are
Yeah.
in that state of fight or flight, if there is chaos and drama all around them when the first things they see are two pairs of gloved hands or like just masks on people's faces. And so I love that you were the first one to be able to do it pain free because it is possible. I know for myself, I did it pain free or not pain free. There was a lot of pain. I did it medication free. But I really want to dive deeper into how the birth and the traumatic birth really does affect your postpartum period because I also experienced postpartum depression and I'm wondering if the two were connected.
Yeah, totally. And this is something that is not really, I think we can logically put the pieces together and work it out, but it's just not acknowledged in the way that your body is. So we're obviously primarily designed to survive in our bodies. And this is why I kind of want to talk a bit about like the collective fear around this topic, because not only have we just gone through a very fearful, traumatic experience, if that's what you've gone through, but it's in the kind of run up in the preparation to giving birth, you're dealing with the collective fear that's just bombarding you. Like your friends are, innocently sharing their birth stories, and just what's happening is that your fear response in your body, which is actually in your amygdala in your brain, that overrides your prefrontal cortex, which is where you have your reasoning and your logical kind of making sense of the situation. So all you're really remembering is all the negative stories. So even if you hear like some lovely positive stories or you read them online, unless you're aware of this, your body's naturally and your mind is naturally going to remember all of the fearful stories. And so you're really programming yourself when you're pregnant to be in this fearful state. And it doesn't really matter, how much positivity you try and do, your affirmations, your hypnobirthing course, if you're not aware of this fact that your brain is being programmed in your environment, in your stories, um, you're not really going to be able to do anything about it. So, yeah, so obviously, when you've had that experience, your whole body is in yeah, it's in fight or flight mode. And actually, it's really in freeze mode, to be honest, because we are given a baby. They're now reliant on us for survival. We shut down our body in terms of we're just not going to deal with it right now. And that is actually where we don't understand that we're holding onto that trauma. And that is going to impact. I actually talk about this I do a whole explanation at the beginning of one of my programs called Reclaiming Your Birthing Power. And I go into the science into it a lot more in a lot more detail. But the symptoms and the side effects of holding onto this trauma and not releasing it is things like intrusive thoughts, deep sadness, feeling completely like terrified to let go of your baby, like you're just on edge. Um, there's so many kind of I think I list about 20 different symptoms that we've normalized, but that's actually a sign of, or even like we put it under the label of depression, postpartum depression, postpartum OCD. These are just labels for all the symptoms that you're going to experience if your body is in that freeze state because it hasn't been able to release the trauma. And when I was learning about kind of trauma and how to release it, we are naturally designed to go through an experience like this, but then our body knows how to release the trauma. But because we don't know what we're doing and we kind of think that there's something wrong with us, we actually are blocking our response to release the trauma. So things like crying, like you probably feel like, oh, I can't cry now, or you feel ashamed for crying. And again, this comes back to programming, like, don't cry, big girls don't cry, boys don't cry, that kind of thing. And I did do a lot of crying, but there was still a lot more I needed to release. Even things like shivering, that is another natural response that our body's doing to get this trauma out of our body. We immediately think, what's wrong with me? I need to put on a blanket or go to the doctors because something's crazy going on with my body. And again, we kind of put a label on it or a plaster on it, thinking, and we, talk down to ourselves, this isn't normal, what's wrong with me? But actually, it's your body's natural way of releasing this trauma. It's trying to help you. And these are all things that I had no idea about either a couple of years ago. And this is why I teach this in one of my programs. I really recommend that if you're not a first-time mum and you've had a traumatic birth experience, the very first place you start before you go into having your, next birth is to clear that trauma. Otherwise, you're operating from all of these kind of negative limiting beliefs, and that is what's going to dominate your next experience. So no matter how much you try and do consciously, your subconscious is going to be like running the show.
I've done a lot of work. I work with the subconscious mind, and I've found that a lot of women actually are unable to get pregnant again if they're still holding on to the trauma because the body and especially the womb is like, it was so bad the first time, it's unsafe
Mhm.
to do it again because
Wow.
it just holds on to that memory, right? Our body does such a good job at holding on to the memory of what it needs to allow us to survive. And for the most part, it's great. But for times like this, when we're like, but I want to keep having kids, I want to get pregnant, holding on to that trauma, like you said, can not only affect your motherhood experience, but also affect your ability to even conceive. So
Yeah,
you
that
mentioned
makes
about
sense.
this conscious collective fear. Why do you think that we have this conscious collective fear and beliefs and programming that birth is traumatic and painful and long and we need to do it the quickest way and the most the easiest, I'll say the easiest way by doing
Yeah.
C-sections and hospital births and all the things that, again, us as sovereign women, we know that there's something else that's possible. Why it's a conscious collective belief that it's filled with trauma?
Yeah, I think there's so many things that feed into this, but the first thing that's kind of coming to mind is that fear itself is very contagious and it grows and multiplies very, very quickly. So what could have started off as a very, innocent thing when you say you got modern medicine, for example, what started off as an incredible intervention as a C-section, they've developed how to do the operation in a very quick and effective way. That all it takes is a couple of things in certain circumstances to go wrong. People are sharing those stories, research happens, and it's those fears that get amplified and kind of get out of control. And now we're talking on a global scale because C-sections happen in every single country. And yes, they do save babies' lives. Yes, they are absolutely necessary in certain situations. I am so grateful I had that option. And I do feel like I went through this whole process for a greater reason. And I'm not just I'm that type of person that everything on your journey is going towards your growth. And you can either choose to make something out of it or become the victim of it. So I am grateful that I had that choice. But then what happens is it's just on such a everyday level. You go for lunch with your girlfriends, at least one of them around the table has had a bad experience. And rather than really kind of getting to the truth of their situation, it's very misleading. So you say, oh, I was in labor for 3 days. That sounds painful. If you've never given birth, you're thinking, this sounds horrendous. I don't want to be in pain for 3 days. Or you say, oh, I tore and had to get stitched up. That also sounds awful. There are so many little nuances that are just said in a story. And if you've never given birth before, oh my gosh, your brain is creating a million other stories. And your fear is just going to the next level. And then no wonder when you're going through your birth experience, you're already got all of this in the back of your mind. Like half the people are just going to check out and be like, okay, C-section. And then no wonder, obviously, mistakes are going to happen. Babies are also, like you say, they're going to be very stressed. Things can go wrong. I know their collarbones can break at times and their heads can be damaged from being sucked out. And there's so many things that can actually happen that this, I feel like, is then escalating the problem. Whereas if we all just go back to the truth of who we are, how powerful we are, that we are so incredibly designed to birth our baby. And I also don't believe that you can birth a baby that's too big for your body. I think that is a very big scaremongering thing that's kind of got out of control as well. Um, but yeah, so I feel like each one of us has a responsibility now to get back to the truth of our essence, of our power. And also, when you do hear a story, ask the questions because every single time I've heard a story, I can guarantee their body was tensed up. They were not relaxed. They did not trust themselves. And I'm yet to come across a story where the person was 100% in their power, 100% relaxed, knew exactly what they were doing with their breathing, knew exactly how to drown out the environment around them, and then still go on to have a traumatic birth. I've not heard that story because that doesn't exist yet. Like, I would love to come across one. And I've read hundreds and hundreds of different stories in different kind of groups online and obviously spoken to loads of people. And so, yeah, so I think this is what I'm on a mission to do as part of my personal power work, because, like you say, this trauma then feeds into our parenting, the impact on the child. Our emotions are felt by the baby. That actually then develops into different symptoms for them. So it's not just, things like eczema and like chronic coughs. And I've experienced this too. So I'm really coming from experience. My second baby, even though we had a great birth, I realized that there was a dynamic going on in my household, whereas I was feeling stressful, and that was actually going on to his. And I think I came on and asked you about what my son's cough was related to because I was trying to find the energetic answer. And that's when I started realizing, like, whoa, like he was really taking on the stress in the environment and from me as his, primary caretaker. And he's with me 24/7. So of course it makes sense. So yeah, imagine if you haven't dealt with all the emotions around your birth, that is then obviously going to have an impact. And I know this is not like a blame game at all. This is empowerment to then take responsibility and learn how to release your own emotions.
I love all of that so much. And have you seen the documentary? I know it's on Gaia. I'm not sure where else it is, but I think it's called The Business of Being Born?
No, I haven't.
No. So it talks about how, like, and I agree with everything that you're saying, this conscious collective energy and just like the fear is just building up and up and up. And then the other side of it is that doctors actually make so much more money on C-sections than they do on natural births. So of course it's going to be pushed. Of course it's going to be advised. Of course it's going to be there's conditions that are being placed on us as moms, especially if we do receive epidurals, or if we receive, I believe it's oxytocin to help with the contractions. It actually
Hmm.
directs you as a mom and the baby to the direction of having a C-section, which is so much more traumatic for you and the baby, right? Especially
Yeah.
when there is that extra pressure from the oxytocin and the baby's heart rate goes all over the place.
Hmm.
The other side of it, though, that you mentioned that I really want to dive deeper into is that when we tap out of our power, that's when the fear has the strength to take over. So, what can we do? What can moms do, especially if you're a new time mom and you're listening to this, or you're pregnant and you're just about to have your child and you're like, holy shit, what's going to happen? What can moms do to stay in their power during this birth process?
Yeah, great question. So this is what I did. I This is really like kind of practice that I did. So the first thing is your breathing. So your breathing is free. You've got it with you 24/7, and which is like so reassuring, especially through labor. And if you can slow your heart rate down, get that get the oxygen going all the way to your blood and kind of getting your body back to your homeostasis, that is immediately going to help you lock back into your power. So when fear really latches on when you're in that survival state, and that is when your blood is going to your arms and legs so you can run and kind of get out away from the danger. So I think when if you just remember that kind of basic science tiny little lesson there, and get back to your breath. So I literally did like in for 4 and then out for 8, and you just kind of I would visualize my most calming place. So for me that is the beach, and I would always, thankfully, I live by the beach. So when I was pregnant, I would stand on the beach so I could literally imagine it more kind of viscerally. And I would sway on the beach while I was heavily pregnant, listening to the sea and the sounds of the sea. So even if you need to like go on YouTube and look up videos to really connect yourself, I would visualize at the same time as using your breath. Even like listening to music. So using all your senses drowns out any kind of ability to get that fear kind of back in your system. And really remembering that like fear is not powerful. It's a complete illusion that we are kind of easily feared, or we allow the fear to take over, but we are actually always in control of what we want to experience, what we think, our emotions, how we respond to things. And this is something that, again, is a big part of my work and around personal power, of course. Um, so I would go back to your breathing, go back to basics, visualize your most calming place, wherever that might be, and then use like all of your senses. So even if you want to go and eat something that makes you happy, listen to something, touch something that makes you feel calm, whether it's like a really lovely silk bedding or something, blanket, or your kid's toy or something, um, kind of really focus on connecting back to your body. That would be my like biggest thing. And also your what I think is really important is you did mention about the whole C-sections are more money, and in Peru it was double the price. So I actually, because we only had half my private health insurance covered because I just got to Peru, so we paid out of pocket for 50%, and it was 50% cheaper than getting a C-section. So that was another little win for me. I was like, yes, we saved like $1,000. But what I actually really noticed was, and I know this isn't for all doctors because some doctors might be more money driven, but my doctor actually was very fear driven. So the reason why she was pushing a C-section onto me at 40 weeks was because she wanted to be in control, because she knows she can cut open a stomach, get the baby out, bish bash bosh, and go home. And she actually had her own baby at home who was only 3 months when I had my baby. So priorities as well, it's more convenient. But it was coming from a place of fear. So even when, thankfully, she'd never told me that she hadn't delivered a baby with no kind of, with the mother not on any medication. Otherwise, I would have felt a bit nervous. So she did the right thing there to not tell me. But I did sense that even throughout my whole experience, the doctors were coming in telling me, don't eat. They had already prepared the C-section room for me. They wanted to put the cannula in my hand in case I needed to go straight into surgery. So imagine this, I'm in my zone. I know I'm giving birth naturally. I'm like calm as hell. Like, I'm just like having a great time. And meanwhile, my entire environment is the complete opposite. Everyone's on edge. No one knows what to expect because they've never experienced this before. They are literally preparing me for surgery. They're even telling me. I did say no to the cannula because I knew that was going to be, it's painful. I don't like it anyway, but I knew it was going to be a distraction physically on my body. And they weren't very happy with that. But again, you are in control and you have the power to say no. And this is what I really want to kind of get across as well, is that when you are in that fearful state, you just tap out of your power so quickly. But you don't realize that you've always got that choice. And I know there's this big thing of like, but doctors are so pushy, XYZ. But if you are so confident and strong in your energy, your doctor is going to feel that. And my doctor had no doubt in me because I didn't doubt myself. Whereas if I had started to doubt myself, which is exactly what I did with my first birth experience, oh my God, my midwives were so nervous. They didn't have any faith in me because I didn't have faith in me. So yeah, I actually wrote a whole guidebook on my process and what I did because I want every single woman to know how to tap into their power and how to just exude the energy of like, I'm doing this. I believe in myself. I trust in myself. And we are all energetic beings, and the doctors are going to feel that. And so often, the reason why doctors are pushing is because they're scared and they're just like, well, I can't have a baby that dies on my books. So you're going to listen to me because you clearly don't know what you're doing. And yeah, that's, I feel like, is how things kind of get out of control. And we have all, even the stories of like, oh, but you don't know what it's like giving birth in hospital. Well, now I do. I have a very good idea in a different country where they really push C-sections and epidurals. So I feel like my experience is a really good story to debunk all the myths, and kind of teach you how to get back into your power.
I loved what you said about when you're in your power, then the doctors feel it because I think that's one of the reasons why, and probably for myself as well, it was I tapped out of my power because my daughter's heart rate went way down, like in the last like 2 minutes. And so they quickly like took her out. I ended up getting cut too, which was a painful recovery. And they quickly were like, okay, cut the umbilical cord, take her away. And it was, okay, they know more than me. But if I had just stayed in my power, I would have realized that she was fine. She was completely okay. There was no need to cut the umbilical cord. There was no need to. They ended up telling me it was procedured that she had to go to the hospital after because I had a home birth. That if her heart rate
Okay.
stopped breathing, she had to go straight to the hospital. And I disagreed. Or so I just agreed and I just let them take her away. And I wish that I had just stayed in my power to say, no, she's okay, she's breathing, bring her back to me, allow me to hold my child.
Mhm.
And so I think that the staying in your power is so important because, yes, doctors have been doing this, they've had many births, but they don't know your body like you do. They don't know your
Mhm.
child like you do. They don't know your power like you do. And if you can just stay in that, then everything is going to shift around you to have things work in your favor in the highest and best way because you were in your power. You're no longer in that, like you said, that fear-based place where everyone else will make decisions for you because they're living out of fear as well, because they're going to feed off of your energy. So I
Yeah.
know you have your guidebook. What is it called? Because I want to make sure that we get that out there.
It's called the Powerful Birth Guidebook. I've actually got printed copies now.
Oh, I
This
love
is
that.
the if you can see on the video, obviously not everyone's watching video. But I've got the Powerful Birth Guidebook, which is 53 pages. I kind of got a bit carried away because as I was writing it, there was just more and more that wanted to come out. So I was like, whoa, I wasn't expecting to write so much. And it does actually include, I think it's 9 pages of birth preference template. So I include C-section preferences because it's so important that if you do have to go for that C-section, you know you've still got choices, you know what it's going to entail, where you can make decisions. And that is something that I was actually aware of in my first birth, and it did really help me feel calm and safe about a C-section. Because I think if you're going to go in and you're like, no, I only want a natural birth, I'm going to ignore the C-section, well, then you're actually kind of not doing yourself any favors, because if something does happen, you're going to be in that state of fear because you have absolutely no idea about a C-section. And that is again going to have an impact on the baby. And then I've got the hospital birth checklist in there, like really helpful information. And then everything that I did to prepare myself for this natural birth. And I break it down into like the mind, the body, and the soul. And why it's really important that you look at all three. And I feel like we all just focus on, especially the body, and we think, okay, I need to know about the body, I need to eat well. But it's like, what are you doing about your thoughts? And also, what are you doing about your truth and your soul connection and your intuition? Like, are you learning to listen to your intuition while you're pregnant so that you know when, like you say, in labor or birth, are you listening to your intuition, which was probably screaming at you, going, "Your baby's fine, just give her a cuddle." But instead, you didn't probably have that awareness, and you just handed your tapped out of your power and handed that over. And then I have the birth partner edition. So this is the other version with my husband, an old photo of us from our first birth. And I just had to create the birth partner little mini guide, because if your birth partner, I do know that there's probably a bit of a thing where men are not that interested in the hypnobirthing course. And I know my husband was like, do I really need to watch every single video? And I was like, no, but just watch a couple of them. So I created this for those that would rather just have all the information in front of them. They can flick through it. And it's also been proven that if you've got a supportive partner, whether that's the father or your mum or a doula or someone else, you are way more likely to have that natural birth experience. So, yeah, it's really important that you also are aligned with whoever's going to be in the room with you, and on your team.
I love it so much. I love both of them so much. It's going to be so life-changing for so many women who are, again, they want to step out of that fear and then come back to their intuition. So you provided us with so much amazing information today, and I'm so truly grateful for it. Where can we find you if we're wanting to get more information about all of this and step into our power?
So I'm mostly on Instagram, and that is Alice_Kingsnorth. I'm also on LinkedIn. I'm kind of growing my presence a bit more on there because it's just such a good, I think it's becoming more social. So it's such a good platform to be on as well. I do have a Facebook business page, and I can share all these links. I'm sure you might put them in the notes of this. But yeah, come and message me, say hello. And if you want a copy of the guide, you can get both, and it's $9 and you get both. I've made it really accessible on purpose, and I decided to put just a tiny price tag because I do feel it's important that if you are going to download it, it's got lots of my personal information in there about my experience, that I want to make sure that you're actually committed. Because I feel like sometimes with a freebie, people don't really see the value, or they're just downloading it. And I really want to make sure that the people who want this are really going to use it properly. But yeah, thank you so much as well for this amazing kind of nourishing chat. It's kind of got me fired up again. So thank you.
Good. I'm so glad. I'm so grateful for everything that you provided for us today. So, again, I'll add all the links to get to know Alice more and to get into her world and get her guide. And again, thank you so much for being on the Wild Mom podcast.
Thanks,
Bye.
Emily. Speak soon.